Arguing the affirmative on should all drugs be legalized. And I would like to first give thanks to everyone for coming, Cassandra and Terrence, timekeeper, adjudicators, opponents, and my lovely partner. And without any further ado, I would like to first start off by giving a definition of drugs. Something and often illegal that causes addiction, habituation, or a marked change in consciousness. Our weighing mechanism is revenue and personal choice. I will be the one that is going to give my opponent the foundation. Contention number 1. Criminal prohibition of drugs has not eliminated or substantially reduced use, however, legalization does. An estimated 208 million people internationally consume illegal drugs. In the U.S., results from the 2007 National Survey on Drugs Use and Health showed that 19.9 million Americans use illegal drugs. In Colorado, where marijuana is legal, 8% of that 30-day, marijuana use fell from 22% in 2011 to 20% in 2013. And lifetime use declined from 39% to 37% during the same 2 years. According to the release, it has dropped nearly 5 points in 2009 when hundreds of medical marijuana stores began opening throughout Colorado. I would also like to bring up a point about Amsterdam and the Dutch drug laws, where all drugs are legalized in Amsterdam. Dutch drug policy is unique in the whole world. It is directed by an idea that every human being may decide about the matters of its own health. The Dutch consider this rule as a fundamental, accepting, for example, as the only country in the world, the possibility of the controlled suicide, voluntary euthanasia for terminally ill patients. Another idea which guides Dutch laws in their drug policy is a conviction that hiding social negative phenomena does not make them to disappear. On the contrary, makes them worse because when concealed, they become far more difficult to influence and control, which I am in total agreement with. I also have a side note that the statistical data certifies that among young people of medium age 21 in the Netherlands, only 16% ever smoke marijuana. Soft drugs, when widely accessible, seems to lose much of their appeal. People want what they can't have, and we all have to admit to that. Contention number 2, economic boom and regulations. Legalization would free up billions of dollars that the government now spends on police, courts, and corrections to wage war on drugs and will produce significant tax revenues. The most saved could then be spent on drug education, drug treatment, and law enforcement initiatives directed at more serious crimes. It's no secret that the government taxes are spending. In fact, sales tax is one of the main ways that the government brings in money. I have another fact that I had typed. America is number 3 on the top 10 cigarette consuming countries in the world. The federal excise on cigarettes grossed $8,512,263,000 in tax revenue. So by doing this, we are allowing not only more money in the government's bank account, but also ours. This number has increased tremendously since then, so imagine how much they will bring in with illegal drugs, especially if your average leading drug cartel is producing millions. We have to realize that the drug industry is profit-driven. The U.S. is profit-driven. Also, I have regulations. Soft drugs, we would say that they should be given to people 18 or older, hard drugs 21 and older, because we feel as though those ages are appropriate for those different drugs. Hard drugs being heroin, cocaine, soft drugs being marijuana, etc. Legalized drugs have no standardized potency. If the drugs were legalized, the government not only regulates distribution, quantity, and restriction, but also potency levels. The regulation of all illegal drugs would have to have the same regulations as legal drugs, such as the FDA and governmental regulations. Every time. Question.
My question is, how are you going to regulate drugs like meth, crack cocaine that you can just make in your kitchen?
The point is that if everything that goes through the government has to be sent through the FDA, you have to put a nutrition factor. Question.
How are you going to regulate drugs like heroin, meth, and crack cocaine that you can literally make in your kitchen?
I would like to bring up the case on the Amsterdam drug policy, which states that another idea which guides Dutch laws in their drug policy is a conviction that hiding social negative phenomena does not make them disappear. On the contrary, it makes them worse because when concealed, they become far more difficult to influence and control. So it's not necessarily saying that if the government has control over these drugs that it's going to completely vanish. However, it is more controlled. Which leads me to contention 3, infringes on civil liberties. And civil liberties are personal guarantees and freedoms that the government cannot abridge. The government indirectly profits from the drug industry by taking an illegitimate product and create legitimate businesses to try to help you. Taxpayers end up paying for rehabilitation that's caused by people who produce and profit from the use of illegal drugs. And in the end, the taxpayers pick up the tab. Drug prohibition infringes on civil liberty. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided that because drugs are such a horrible thing, it is okay to bend the Fourth Amendment, which relates to searches and seizures. In order to make it easier to secure convictions in drug cases, police must be able to prove that a crime has occurred under the Constitution. Also, a judge by the name of Andrew Napoleon wrote a book called What Happens When the Government Breaks Its Own Laws, and in a nutshell, nothing happens. However, we're being convicted. These drug cartels are being housed, and our tax dollars are going towards that. Which leads me to contention 4, racism. The whole war on drugs deals with race. And I cede my time, and I strongly urge that you will vote the affirmative on today's debate. Oh, you're already. Contention 1, the effects of drugs overall. When I'm saying the effects of drug overall, I'm not talking about within the person, I'm talking about throughout a community. Chief Medical Examiner in Colorado said, there has been an increase in cardiac arrest and multiple organ failures. My God, why did we legalize this drug? What were we thinking? The death toll is increasing. Now this is with a soft drug like marijuana. Think about what would happen if we legalized all drugs like meth, heroin, crack, cocaine, other hard drugs like that. Like there's going to be a lot of more overdoses once we legalize these drugs. Now this brings me to my points on my first contention. Addiction will not stop. Drug overdosings will not stop. And there will also be an increase in youth experimentation. With addiction, actually addictions will increase. I'm going to get to your question as soon as I'm done with my contention. Addictions will increase because more people are going to start taking drugs because they know that it's legal. Second, drug overdosings will increase because more people that do drugs are going to actually have overdoses because they don't know their limits because they're just now starting using drugs. And next is going to be on youth experimentation. Now the affirmative says that they have regulations that they have to be 18 and up and 21 and up to use these drugs. But just like any kid can get alcohol and cigarettes, it's going to be just as easy for them to get any new drugs. And now I can take your question. How can you say that if the government would also regulate the potency of the product?
What do you mean?
You said that more people would overdose.
Okay, when we're talking about overdosing, like when I got up and I asked her, how are we going to regulate drugs like meth and crack cocaine that we can literally make in a kitchen? You can literally make those drugs in a kitchen. The government can't watch you as you're making that drug in your kitchen. So if you're making 3 ounces of meth in your in-home lab, then you can take those 3 ounces of meth yourself without the government regulating it. So the government can't really regulate how much of that drug you're taking. Plus, you can take as much of that drug as you want. So overdosing can still happen. Plus, different people's bodies can take different amounts of drugs. So for the affirmative to say that it's going to be a regulation on how much you can take, we literally have to do weigh-ins at every single store just to make sure that your body is good enough to use this amount of drug. Now moving on to my contention 2, the effects on professions. Now we have the affirmative in a double bind here. Either 1, they stop drug testing before people go to work, or 2, they increase drug testing, which increases the unemployment rate because nobody wants to hire somebody that's high off of drugs. Now the first part of the double bind is that either they're going to stop drug testing. That means that your child's bus driver could be high off heroin, or you could have a doctor that was smoking reefer before he goes into doing your brain surgery. Like, it's not good to not allow people to have drug testing before giving them a job. And then secondly, the second part of the double bind is that they do let you have drug testing, but it's up to the employer if you're going to be hired or not. And with that, it means that no employer wants to hire somebody that has been using drugs. Now, what I'm saying this is that if we legalize drugs, more people will be using drugs. That means that less people will be getting hired, therefore increasing the unemployment rate. Next is racism. Now, the affirmative team brought up racism, but they really didn't get to their contention on racism. And here's what I have to say about it. By legalizing drugs, it's actually going to induce a new Jim Crow. Now, this is a literature from Michelle Alexander. It reads, by legalizing drugs, we are allowing white men to run marijuana business, dreaming of cashing big money and big business selling weed, while after 40 years of impoverished black kids have been getting prison time for selling weed and their families and futures destroyed. And now white men are planning to get rich doing precisely the same thing. Now, if you don't understand what I'm saying in this contention, basically this is saying that it's okay when the white man does it. Now, the affirmative might come up here and say, well, black men can own these businesses too, but the probability of that happening is highly improbable. It's not going to happen. Realistically, white men are going to own these big businesses. White men are going to be selling you your crack. You won't see any rich black person trying to open up their own meth store. You're not going to see Oprah having her own marijuana store. You're not going to see Al Sharpton trying to make money off of crack. It's just not going to happen. White people are going to be cashing in on big business. Oh, you can ask a question.
What source did you get that Oprah wouldn't start her own crack in?
It's an analytical argument, and I'm pretty sure that Oprah wouldn't start her own crack.
What sources?
I don't need a source. It's an analytical argument. Now moving on to their case. First, let's start on their weighing mechanism is revenue and personal choice. Basically, with their weighing mechanism, they're giving us a price on life. They're saying if we can make this amount of money, that it doesn't matter if this many people die. You know, so basically they're saying that if we make $1 million because people are buying crack, meth, weed, PCP, and other drugs, that's okay as long as the government's cashing in on it. Secondly, they can't even say that we're actually going to get a profit from this, because who's going to buy taxed weed when they can literally make their own weed in their room? The government's not going to be able to regulate these things, especially drugs like meth and weed and other things that you can make in your house. They only be able to regulate things that people can't make, and they're not going to be cashing in on that. Secondly, is that she says that that marijuana use, and there's over 200 million people internationally that do illicit drugs. What you have to see is that's international, and drug use is actually down in America, it's gone down from 15% of people using it to 9% of people using it between 2002 and 2013. So if more people aren't using drugs, why would we legalize it? Next, she says that with the money that they make, they're going to open up drug rehabilitation and drug treatment places. Why in the world would we legalize drugs and then give people drug treatments? So that's basically saying the opposite of something. Like, we're going to legalize drugs, make money off of it, and then make you pay to, have drug treatments. And then we're not going to make money off of the drugs anymore because you're not going to be using them. It's one or the other. Either you're condoning people using drugs or you're not condoning people using drugs. Go ahead.
I would like to know where in my contention did I say that, because that is the complete opposite of what I said.
And after your economic boom, you said that you're going to have taxes and then you're going to open up drug treatment facilities.
No, that's not.
Okay, so what did you say?
I said that the government...
Can you read exactly from your paper? Like, you put it up here because you definitely said that you were going to tax it and then open up drug treatment facilities.
I will most definitely read my contention.
For the record, time has been stopped for point of information.
Okay, so I can...
Yeah. Make it brief, please.
The government indirectly profits from the drug industry by taking an illegitimate product and create legitimate business to try to help you taxpayers end up paying for rehabilitation centers. I did not say that we are going to pay for it.
Where's economic boom at? Is that under that contention?
This is not under economic boom.
Okay, then go to your economic boom contention because that's where I wrote down. You're going to use the money that you have from the economic boom to open up drug treatment facilities.
There's nowhere in
The judges will take all of it in consideration. They will consider their flow, but for the sake of time, we're going to move on with the debate.
Okay, that's fine. Even though I wrote that down, I'm not making it up. But even if they don't, Obama literally just gave $10 billion in the 2013 fiscal year to support drug education programs and support for expanding access to drug treatment for people suffering from substance and use disorders. So that means that Obama is thinking that instead of legalizing drugs, we're just going to open up drug treatment facilities to stop people from using these drugs. Next, she brings up regulations. You can't regulate all drugs. That's highly improbable. They're not going to make money off of it. They have no solvency in their argument because they can't regulate. They can't make people. They can't make sure that people don't overdose. If anything, they're giving a price on life, and you have to extend every argument that I made in my contentions. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a special welcome. I would like to welcome the adjudicators, and I would also like to congratulate my opponent on her performance. It was very entertaining. However, although it was entertaining, there were a few flaws. Let's delve into this a bit. The first flaw I would like to counteract was the argument over racism. Now, you stated that blacks wouldn't be able to do the same things as whites. I would like to point out that it's this same type of feeling of inadequacy that leads our children astray into feeling that the only way they can prosper is by selling drugs illegally. What makes it incapable of a black person doing the same, if not more than a white person? Examples of Dr. Bass, examples of President Obama, examples of Benjamin Banneker in a time when slavery was prevalent. I would also like to say there are cardiac arrests and heart attacks from the food that we consume. Drug addiction is not the only form of addiction. America is one of the most obese countries according to the World Health Organization in 2013. Yes.
Are you saying that because people are dying from food and other things that aren't drug addictions, that it's okay for people to die from drug addiction?
The definition of a drug is something that is addictive. Drugs aren't just limited to marijuana or...
Wasn't your own definition of drug something that is often illegal? And, like, didn't she give a totally different... No, her definition.
You said my definition.
Excuse, can you pause time real quick?
Another fact I to say that you committed was...
Assign real quick. Just for point of information, anytime you have a question, raise it, answer it. If you have another one, raise it again. Wait for his acknowledgement, then answer it. I'm sorry, proceed.
point out is use and abuse of expertise committed by my fellow opponent. What grounds does she have to make these assertions with no source of weight? These assertions that she's made of, you know, drugs are bad, this and that, whatever she says. This has no weight or no ground, and it's not sound. It's not a sound argument, being that she has no source. Although it is important that it's an analytical argument, there needs to be some form of source and some form of weight in order to make such assertions that are so powerful. Legalization of drugs is not racism. However, it is another form of retribution for black people to be able to claim the injustices that have been served over us for hundreds of years, not thousands. It is a form of us to regain wealth. I will answer the question when I finish. Thank you. One thing I would like to go back to what my lovely Prime Minister stated was that, yes, there will be economic boom and regulations on these drugs concerning what goes on outside of people's homes. People are accountable for themselves. However, the government is accounted for what is better for all of us. Yes?
By stating that America is going to make profit off of drugs, are you putting a value on life?
Value on life is here relative concerning the many forms of things that counteract life on a daily basis, dealing with capitalism, going back to what I said about obesity and how the government regulates our food that we intake on a daily basis, along with alcohol and the Surgeon General. All these things have warnings on them. People know what they are risking when they consume something or when they watch something.
Oh,
Yes.
to simplify my question for you, are you trying to say it's okay for people to die from drugs as long as the government is making money from it?
That's a good question. I'll give you that. However, on a daily basis, soldiers in Afghanistan die for the betterment of the government. However, at the end of the day, it's utilitarianism, being that it's what's best for all the American people and not just a few. You kill one to save 1,000. Yes.
Are you saying that we have to break a few eggs to make an omelet?
I never said that. I'd like to also point out a great statistic. At least 16% of teenagers polled in Dutch city of Amsterdam have ever smoked weed in their lives, in their whole entire lives. That's a small percentage concerning that all drugs are legal in Amsterdam, a city where drugs, prostitution is prevalent. It goes back to what my lovely and very intelligible Prime Minister said about how when you take something away from the people, it creates a sort of distortion and it creates a want. It's like when a parent tells a child not what to do and they end up rebelling against them. It's the same effect. Now, I would like the audience, and I would really appreciate my adjudicators taking all of this in. And I would like to arrest my case for the affirmative of legalization of all drugs. Thank you.
Judges, welcome. Thank you for coming. To my partner, thank you for being my partner. To our opponents, thank you for putting up a good fight. And before I start, I would like to give a little roadmap. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on our contentions, and then I'm going to incorporate negating our opponent's contentions. And I didn't even introduce myself, did I? Okay. My name is Travis Young. I'm a senior criminal justice major with minors in both biology and psychology here at Clark Atlanta. So with that being said, let's continue.
Psychology.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I got. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so our contention number one was the effects of drugs overall. Our opponents say that drugs is not an addiction, but that goes to show you the lack of education that they have with drugs. Drugs lead to dependency, which means a person does drugs for the sake of functioning. So a person may smoke weed just to study, but then that dependency could lead to addiction, which means there's a lack of functioning and behavior. So one would do drugs for reasons of to get their next high. But what people fail to realize is when people do drugs, they will never achieve their first high. But yet they continue to take it, which is why drug overdose becomes a problem. Our opponents also gave a definition of what drug is. They said that drug is a change in consciousness. Consciousness means thinking. Why would you want to do something that alters your behavior? You think something, you do it. That's not going to work if we legalize a society of drugs. Addiction, loss of function. Drug overdose. If we legalize drugs, drugs will be sold at therapeutic doses. But please be aware that 22,400 individuals died due to overdose of prescribed drugs. As I stated earlier, if drugs were legalized, they'd be sold at a therapeutic dosage, meaning medical dosage, meaning prescribed by a doctor. So, if we legalize drugs, there'll be an increase in prescribed drugs overdose. A survey was taken. 50% of teens believe that prescription drugs are much more safer than illegal drugs. But this belief is falsifying, meaning prescribed drugs, legalized drugs, can be just as damaging as illicit drugs.
I'd like to ask, when did I get that definition of drugs that they weren't an addiction? I believe I said the total opposite, that they weren't an addiction. That's what the drugs are.
Well, the fact you stated that drugs are addiction, obviously should have been legal.
But you didn't say that. You didn't say that though. You said that I said that they weren't an addiction.
I'm not going to go back and forth with you, but obviously drugs shouldn't be legalized. Okay. Also, please take note that our opponents are trying to put a value on life. They're basically saying as long as the government is making money from a tax product, then it's okay for people to be dying. As my partner stated, there has been the death toll is increasing in the state of Colorado that already has legalized drugs. There has been an increase in cardiac arrest, meaning blood and heart failure, and other multiple organ failures. Obviously, drugs didn't work in the beginning. Government has to protect the citizens under the social contract theory, which means citizens give up certain rights and liberties for the protection of the government. So, the act that was implemented was the Controlled Substance Abuse Act of 1970. This act was implemented because the government saw that there was damage being done to the health of individuals because there was no regulations on drugs. Our opponents clearly stated that President Nixon said that drug abuse was public enemy number one. So to go on our contention number 2, drugs in the workplace. I'll take your question.
Where in our contention did we say anything about President Nixon?
Well, whatever that president's name was, you said that
we had no president at all.
Well, you did state in one of your contentions that drug use is public enemy number one. So obviously it shouldn't be legalized. So back to my contention number 2, drugs in the workplace. Seriously, why would you want a bus driver to drive your kids to school if they have weed in their system? That's basically putting your child in jeopardy. Why would you put yourself in jeopardy? Drugs become an issue. Yes, a person can do whatever they want with their body, but it becomes your problem when the person behind you is on a highway and they have weed or cocaine or meth or alcohol in their system. 70% of employees already work in the workplace have drugs in their system. So if we legalize drugs, basically this percentage will increase. Yes, I'll take your question.
As short as you use President Nixon, wasn't he also resigned from enabling votes?
At the end of the day, you stated in your argument that drug abuse is public enemy number one. So why would you legalize drugs? If
I stated in my argument, drug abuse.
Y'all stated. I'm not gonna go back and forth with you, but nice to so nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, by legalizing drugs, are we condoning these acts? I'm asking that question to the audience. By legalizing drugs, are we condoning the acts? Are we saying that it is okay for a doctor to operate on you with cocaine in his system? Is it is it okay for teachers to teach you when they're high? Is it okay for your, as I said earlier, your bus driver to drive your kids to school? Okay, our contingent number 3, racism control. As my partner stated earlier, African Americans have suffered 40 years due to the fact of drug possession charges. And white men are trying to make a profit from drugs when black men have been damaged from it. This is basically saying that African Americans are not guaranteed pardons from their record when drugs are legalized. American does not guarantee pardons from laws that have been passed to change an old law. So by stating this, 98,200 inmates, majority of large blacks, are charged in prison are sitting in jail for drug possession, trafficking, and other drug offenses. If we legalize drugs, these individuals are not promised repayment back for the years lost. Again, if anything, new charges would be created if drugs were legalized to affect and continue to oppress African Americans. For example, a new charge that would be created would be suspicion of distribution. Meaning, if an African American walks into a store that has legalized drugs and buys that drug, if he walks out that store, a police stops him and says, I'm going to arrest you. I have a suspicion that you're going to flip or you're suspicious of selling drugs. And basically, he's going to be stating that this African American man is going to be considered to be flipping the price of this drug. So to kind of sum it up, think about Eric Gardner in California. He was arrested, or he was suspected of flipping the price of cigarettes. The same thing will be happening to African Americans. They would be suspected of flipping the price of a therapeutic dosage from a legalized system.
How is Eric Gardner relevant to this debate?
I was giving an example of how Eric Gardner was suspicious or accused of flipping the price of cigarettes.
That's illegal though. Cigarettes are illegal.
Flipping the price of cigarettes are illegal.
Once again,
what he was accused of.
Cigarettes are illegal.
If African Americans are suspected of drug distribution, they'll be accused of flipping the price of the legally sold drug, which we just created a new charge for African Americans. Also, African Americans are not awarded the same business opportunities as white individuals. My opponent clearly stated that, how can we sit here and say that Barack Obama doesn't want to open up, how are we going to sit here and say that President Barack Obama doesn't want to open up a drug business or industry? Obviously, he doesn't put money toward drug programs and treatment. He doesn't want to do drugs, or he doesn't want us doing drugs. So with that being said, I end my time.
Straight down my voters. Alright, are you ready? Alright, starting with the weighing mechanism. The weighing mechanism for the affirmative team was that of revenue and personal privilege. The first problem with their weighing mechanism is revenue. If the government's not going to get any more money because of their plan, you can't vote for it. Because they can't regulate drugs like meth, weed, and other things that you can make in your own kitchen, you can't vote for that revenue. Secondly, there will still be a black market after we pass their plan. We said that in the first speech, and it goes uncombated in the second speech. Obviously, people are not going to buy from the highly taxed places because the affirmative team agrees that they are going to tax drugs. They'd rather buy it from somebody off the corner for $10 instead of buying it from the store for $11.75. Secondly, the problem with the weighing mechanism of that is that of personal privilege. Personal privilege means that you're doing something to your own body. But once it starts harming other people, that's a problem. The problem with this is that of addiction. Once somebody gets addicted, their first priority is their addiction. Mothers only want to feed their addiction, and they don't care about their own child. Second, it's hurting personal privilege because if you're high on your job, then you're affecting everybody in the workplace, especially if you're a bus driver, especially if you're a doctor, especially if you're a teacher. If you go to work strung out on drugs, you're going to hurt everybody that's in that environment. Secondly, our second motor is that of more addiction. The affirmative team says that less people are going to use drugs once we legalize them. One, that's not true. Second, people are already stopping using drugs, and they never say anything about that point that I said in my first speech, in his second speech. And third is that the price on life. The affirmative team says that the weighing mechanism should be revenue and personal privilege. But if the affirmative team is literally sitting there and they are saying that money is more important than people overdosing, then you have to vote for the negative team. Because if one person dies because of an overdose, that means that it was a problem with their plan. There's a problem with people dying. Vote for the negative just based on human life. Fourth is that regulations don't matter. They say that they're going to regulate drugs. One already said you can't regulate drugs because there's still going to be a black market. Secondly, they talk about kids in the Netherlands and Dutch kids in Amsterdam that don't use drugs even though they're legal. But that's one, they probably have stricter laws. Secondly, anybody that's over 21 can go in there and buy it for somebody that's under 21. Regulations won't matter. I said that in my first speech. Regulations won't be like a problem, and then kids are still going to be able to get drugs. Kids are still going to become dependent on drugs and overdose and get addicted. Fifth, drugs will never be safe. I don't care how much meth you're going to prescribe to somebody. If you give somebody 0.2 ounces of meth, they're still going to get addicted, and that's still going to be a problem. There's not any amount of meth that's actually healthy for the human body. Sixth, he talks about how cigarettes are legal. Cigarettes are still a problem. Even on every box of cigarettes, it has a Surgeon General warning that tells you the problems that cigarettes have. And basically he's saying, well, if cigarettes are legal, then we should legalize drugs. But that's not something that you should do. If anything, you should actually go against legalizing things that hurt you. And for those reasons and many more, actually, let me just go down the case. Less people do drugs. The Netherlands and Amsterdam doesn't matter because they give harder regulations than what the affirmative team is saying. Third, they say that economic boom, but that really doesn't matter because the economy, because the economy won't go up because there's still going to be a black market, and regulations won't matter because kids are still going to get drugs. Thank you, and vote for the affirmative, or vote for the negative.
Mechanism had nothing to do with morality, which is what she based everything off of. Next, I would like to reiterate my first contention. Criminal prohibition of drugs has not eliminated or substantially reduced drug use. However, legalization does. And like I stated before, according to the release, it has dropped nearly 5 points since 2009 when hundreds of medical marijuana stores had began. Next, he brought up something about Obama might not want to open a drug business, or Oprah or somebody, but who's to say that Jay-Z won't, or who's to say that 2 Chainz won't, or your neighbor won't, or anybody else won't? And I feel as if they were regulated. When things are concealed, they're harder to regulate. How can the government regulate something that they know nothing about? What happens in the privacy of your own home is your business. The government can only regulate what is in the public. Next, I would like to reiterate what I said about Amsterdam, and this is completely relevant to this because this is a place where all drugs are legalized. How can a place where all drugs are legalized have 16% of people who don't use drugs when we have a large percentage of people in a place where drugs are not legal, all drugs are not legal, is higher than that. It says a conviction that hiding social negative phenomena does not make them to disappear. That is not our argument. We are not trying to completely diminish the use of drugs. However, more so regulating. On the contrary, makes them worse because when concealed, they become far more difficult to influence and control, as I stated before. Another one of my voters is the fact that, as I stated, they had no weighing mechanism. Secondly, they brought in false evidence. They brought in all these different points and all these different tidbits of information that we had said nothing about. As a matter of fact, they reiterated things that they had previously said in their contentions and negated it. So apparently they agreed with us. As I said, the opponent has no source to back up the assertion she made about Oprah and different things like that. She's going off of basic knowledge. She's going off of what's already in her mind. So I don't know where she got this analysis from, this conjured up thought from. I don't know, but as you saw, me and my opponent were just sitting back like, what is she talking about? She said something about putting value on life and it's okay to die. Well, people die from eating too many cheeseburgers. As a matter of fact, people die more from using pharmaceutical pills and different things of that nature, things that are regulated by the government rather than illegal drugs. Okay, and as I said, I cede my time and I strongly urge that you vote the affirmative on today's debate.